Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today, we're going to start with Colonel John Singleton Mosby and how he directly impacted the life of this man, pictured here, John J. White. So let's go to Mosby and his Partisan Rangers. In the summer of 1864, they moved to disrupt federal communications along the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad in Virginia as part of a coordinated effort to support Lieutenant General Jubal Early and his raid on Washington, D.C., or I should say, the raid that ended at Washington, D.C., right in front of Washington, D.C., along the way, the Battle of the Monocacy. On June 29th, about a month or so before those epic events in front of the national capitol, as Early's corps marched north along the Shenandoah Valley, Mosby and his men rode out from Upperville, Virginia, to cut telegraph wires and create general mayhem. Along the way, they picked up some Union pickets, captured pickets, who told them that on that day, the 29th of June, an eastbound train would be arriving at Duffield's depot at noon. Well, it turns out they were too late, just missed that train by a few minutes. However, there were valuable supplies to be had, and so Mosby and his boys dragged a howitzer up to a knoll overlooking the depot, which also included a guardhouse, a stockade filled with a garrison of Union soldiers, including John J. White. White was 20 years old. He was in the Maryland's 1st Potomac Home Brigade. He resided not too far away in Frederick, Maryland before the war, and he had joined the regiment in 1861. He'd been a casualty once before, a prisoner of war in 1862, September of 1862, captured at Harper's Ferry and paroled after a couple months. So that's John J. White's story up until June of 1864. Now, nearby, White, up on that knoll, Mosby, his men, and a howitzer are perched and watching and making a show of force to the garrison, which is maybe about 50 Union soldiers. Numbers vary as high as 65. Mosby sends down a courier to the commander of the garrison with the request: surrender your men or we're going to come down and get you. The Union lieutenant in command sees that he's overwhelmed, doesn't see a way out, sees that howitzer. He's got no choice. So he complies. He surrenders, including John J. White and the other men. Mosby and his Rangers come down to the depot. They take White and the rest of the soldiers prisoner. They ransack the depot and they loot all the supplies as much as they can. Then they torch the rest of it, including the buildings. They don't burn the depot, but they burn all the outbuildings, and then they take off. There's an 1896 book titled Mosby's Rangers, a record of the operations of the 43rd Battalion Virginia Cavalry, and it contains this description of the aftermath of the raid. Quote, the men had brought a large quantity of dry goods, coffee, etc., from the captured stores at Duffield Depot, and these looked charming to the eyes of the poor people of the Confederacy who had not seen the inside of a store for 2 or 3 years. The long line of prisoners, including White, and captured horses and equipments, and the large United States flag from the camp at Duffield Depot trailed at the gun, all united to form a picturesque scene. End quote. So imagine White and his comrades being marched away by Mosby's men, a large stars and stripes behind them, all the captured stores. Now you got to wonder what happened to White. Well, Mosby delivered him and the other prisoners of war to Alexandria, Virginia. I was curious to find out where he went from there, so I looked up his prisoner of war record, which is located in his military service record in the National Archives. Well, I was amazed to find a single reference to Andersonville. And here's a copy, a scan of that prisoner of war record. And I've highlighted the area in red. It's difficult to read because the writing is scribbled and it contains a bunch of abbreviations. So here's my best transcription. It states, quote, again captured at Duffield Station. And remember, he was captured in 1862. So this is his second capture. It says, quote, again captured at Duffield Station, Virginia, June 29, 1864. Confined at Andersonville, Georgia, date not given, where he was admitted to hospital February 6, 1865, with ulnar contusion. And that's a bruising injury to the nerve located near the elbow. It goes on, number 17079, paroled on or about April 6, 1865, Vicksburg, Mississippi, sent to hospital, Benton Barracks, Missouri, date not present. Reported at Benton Barracks, Missouri, April 24th, 1865, from Jefferson Barracks, Missouri, U.S. General Hospital, transferred to City Provost Marshal, April 29, 1865, where he reported May 2 to 3, 1865, sent to Baltimore, Maryland for muster out, May 6, 1865. So, wow, that prisoner of war record states there's only a single tiny reference to being confined at Andersonville, Georgia, dates unknown. So now I went to the National Park Service's list of Andersonville prisoners. That list contains 42,430 names, and it is famously or infamously incomplete. It is known that not all of the records of Andersonville soldiers are there. In fact, a sidelight, some years ago, as I was researching an Iowa cavalryman, I found records in his pension file where he talks about his imprisonment in Andersonville. I took the paperwork, I sent it to the Andersonville list folks, and eventually they added his name. So I went to the National Park Service list again. I typed in White. I searched by Andersonville and Maryland, and I came up with one name of a man named White. It wasn't John. It was not this man, John White. It was William White. So I believe that I may have found another undocumented Andersonville prisoner. So you can imagine how I felt just a little while ago when I found this record. I was shocked. The opportunity to set the record straight, the opportunity not to correct a historic wrong, because everyone is working in their best, the best that they can do to compile records of a prisoner of war camp, and those records are notoriously incomplete. And so, hopefully, if this is true, I'm going to send this documentation off, and maybe we can get John White added to those who were interred. I should also mention his journey is interesting. We often think of the Andersonville prisoners leaving Georgia and then coming up the coast, the Atlantic coast, making their way to the hospitals around Washington, D.C., and then from there going to their various homes or back to their regiments. In this case, in White's case, he went up the Mississippi River, went through Vicksburg, Benton Barracks, and then on to Baltimore. So he survives all of this and goes to Baltimore, goes back home to Frederick, Maryland, and he lives a rather long life. In fact, On a fall day, 1923, 79-year-old John White is walking down Market Street in Frederick, and he suddenly collapses. A healthy man up to that point. He collapses. Passers-by take him into a grocery store. They call for a doctor. Doctor gets there as quickly as they can, and within a few minutes, White succumbs to whatever ailment caused him to fall. He's buried. Not too long afterwards, he outlived his wife and a son. So there you have the story of John White, who I will soon send his information off to the Andersonville list folks to see if we can't get him added. So thanks for listening. See you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.